idea is that we will record this presentation, but the discussion that I expect will ensue will not be recorded. Okay, so this is the presentation, the public presentation of the Mpai Call for Technologies for the Mpai Metaverse model. This is the name of the project, and the technology, which is the name of the particular part of the standard that we are developing. So who is Mpai? Mpai is moving picture, audio, and data coding by artificial intelligence. We are international, unaffiliated, and non-profit. We develop standards for AI-enabled data coding, but the important point is that we wanted to attach a clear IP guidelines. We have developed 11 standards. We are about to publish a new one. And we have 5 standards adopted by IEEE as IEEE standards. We have more in the pipeline. So well, I would say in 10 days, where we should have something like 9 of our standards, IEEE standards. And by the way, the preceding version of the MMM will also be an Mpai standard. So this is about how serious we are in designing a process that is rigorous, but is also flexible and effective. And we show that it is effective because we had a proposal for a standard, and in less than a year, exactly 11 months, we developed a standard, but still following this process. This process has a part which is preparation, which is condensed in functional requirements. So this thing that we want to do will do what? That is specified in the functional requirement. And commercial requirements are not real commercial requirements. It's called formally a framework license, but it's still guidelines so that people will know what they can expect in terms of such requirements from the standard. So then we expected to receive technologies, and based on them, we will produce a standard. So this is the list. And so I'm not going through these standards, but the only point I would like to highlight is the fact that we have standards on system, on audio. Marina is the chair of that group. On automotive, on finance, on human-machine communication, on metaverse. This is red for one reason. Watermarking, that's exactly the standard that I was referring to before. Then objects and scenes and avatars. So these are the standards that we have. There are more in the pipeline. We have AI for health, end-to-end video coding, upsampling filter for video applications, online gaming, again, systems standard, and entertainment. So this will be quite a big one. And with this call, Mpai is launching a new project in the Mpai Metaverse model. This is called the technologies. And it includes call for technologies, use cases and functional requirement, framework license, and template for responses. So let's go to and see more precisely what is the scope. We invite any party that is able and wishing to contribute to development of the planned technology technical specification to submit a response. We have to be clear that if your technology are selected to this call for this standard, the submitters are required to eventually license their technology according to the framework license. I will say a few words later on. If their technologies are selected for possible modification and inclusion in the planned technical specification. If you are not an Mpai member, you don't want to respond, but you wish to participate in the development of the standard, again, you should join MPAI And if you own the technologies that they are accepted, and you don't wish to join MPAI, then unfortunately you will use the opportunity to have your technologies included in the standard. Next point, the scope. The scope is restricted to the functional requirements that are in the document. However, we are welcome to consider the technology that, or if comments on any element of the document, and propose the technology that are based on motivated proposal to extend or add new functional requirements. But again, they should be in line with the scope of the functional requirements. So it should not be something outside. And they should again satisfy the framework license. So the dates are, so we are on the 31st of May. In a week, if you intended to make a submission, you are asked to describe what you wanted to propose. I mean, it's not mandatory, but it's certainly very welcome. Then on the 6th of July, that we have a deadline for submissions, and on the 10th of July, we will start the evaluation of responses. So let's go into the topic of these use cases and functional requirements. So a little bit of history. So we started in January 2022 with this project, Mpai Metaverse Model. In January last year, we had the first technical report on functionalities. This was really understanding exactly where this MMM thing would be positioned. Then 4 months later, we had the functional profiles technical report. In September, we issued the technical specification on MMM architecture. And in January this year, we had a revised version of the architecture. This is the one that is being adopted by IEEE as IEEE standard. And I like to think that this will be the first standard on the metaverse that is officially adopted by an important standards organization. So what is the current state of standardization of the Mpai Metaverse model? So as I said, we have 2 technical reports that are not normative, but we have the architecture, which is a specification, and it specifies the operation model, the functional requirements of these 4 elements, process, action, items, and basic data. Then by using this specification, an implementer can develop a metaverse instance, we call it M instance, that is able to interoperate with other M instances if they rely on the operation model, use the same profile. Profile is a collection of technologies, nothing special, but very important because it defines the scope of the technologies that are needed to interoperate. Then if they, I'm sorry. Then they use either the same technologies, that of course is the easy way, but they can also use independent technology. But this technology have to satisfy the functional requirements that are included in the standard. Let me proceed. So I've used the word process without explaining what it is. This is quite an important element of the MMM specification. So we have 4 types. One is app. It's a process running on a device. A device is obviously not the device itself. It is the process or the processes that run on the device. And the device does essentially four things. The first is to capture data from the universe. That's how we call it, as opposed to the metaverse. Then send this captured data to somewhere in the metaverse, take something from the metaverse to the device, and render an item in the universe. This is the scope of the device, which is a process. Service, that's clear. User, I will say more, but it is a process representing a human. So it is a human is represented in the metaverse by a process that is called user. So this is maybe a little bit complicated, but it's useful to explain the model, this operation model. So we have here a human. The human uses a device to connect to the metaverse, and in the metaverse, the human as a user. This user is their representative, and the user here is, in this particular case, is rendered as an avatar that we call persona. So it's very important to separate the notion of user from the notion of avatar. The user is a process. Avatar is a bunch of bits that can be rendered, and we can see, hear, in the future also touch them. But if we go here into this human 2, this has 2 devices, not just one. And each device is connected to a user. And here we see that this user 2.1 is actually rendered by 2 avatars. While this other one, there is only one avatar representing user 2.2. Then, if we go to the case of human 3, we see that the user 3.1 has no avatar that is used to render it, because this user is simply a process that does some job in the metaverse. So let's go now to something that we have specified thoroughly in the previous specification, which is called the previous one, the previous Mpai metaverse model specification architecture. We have divided the action in 5 categories. General, so of course registration, but changing the right to a user, hiding an item, authenticate or identify or modify or validate or execute, for instance, a contract. Then we have another category, which is about calling a service. You call an authoring service. You want to discover something, so you call a service because you want to find something in this metaverse, potentially in other metaverses as well. You find an item and you want to know more about the site. Actually, you want an interpretation. Interpretation is a general word that can simply mean the translation, but it can be more sophisticated than that. Transact is obviously very important to have an economy in the metaverse. Post is the action where you post an item. Actually, it's in this case, it's not called an item, but it's called an asset to the metaverse. Then we have all these actions here that are required in order to interact in the metaverse. For instance, this embed, refers to the first M to the source of the action. The second M is to destination. So this means that this action originated and is actuated on in the metaverse. In this case, this embed is you are placing, say, your avatar somewhere, or you're placing a table in the metaverse. This is what we call embed. This is different from embed, where it is the same, but the result is not visible, it's not perceivable, not perceptible. Then we have another set, which is from the metaverse to the universe. So for instance, MU actuate, you are a device and you are actuating, you are rendering something. MU render, this goes directly from the metaverse to the universe. Then we have capture, so the device is capturing something in the metaverse, and so on and so on. So I will not go into further details because this is something that is a given, because this is what we have specified in the previous specification architecture. 2 words about interoperability. So of course we in this figure here, we have identified many entities, but if this is a closed system, then why do you need standards? You potentially, standard may be useful in order to accelerate the deployment of the technology, because some technologies are shared, but otherwise a standard is not necessarily needed. Standard is needed if you have 2 different metaverses and you are in this metaverse, you don't know anything of what runs behind the second metaverse, but you wanted to do something there. I'm not going to into the details of this protocol, whereby this process can be a user, but can be a device, can be anything, wants to do something in this other metaverse, calls a resolution service. The resolution service gets an agreement with the other resolution service, and eventually something is done in the second metaverse. But of course, there are a lot of details, not last the fact that you may need conversion services, because the set of data formats that are used in metaverse A may be different from metaverse B, and therefore a conversion service may be needed. So let's go now into the real scope of the scope, which is about getting more details in the specification of items. Because don't forget that so far the items were only defined in terms of functional requirement. This is sufficient if you are relying on conversion services, but it's not sufficient in a more general case. So let's see. We have a certain number of classes, categories. The first one is a general one. So for instance, we have the notion of M instance, which is specified in several terms. Then we have another notion that is quite important, because, imagine that you are walking in the internet, and you are finding an M instance, and you want to know, what can I do in this M instance? Okay, so this is the set of data that specify what you can do. For instance, in terms of what are the items that are supported, what is the profile, and other things as well. Very important, because this is basic for the MMM approach to the metaverse, is the notion of rights. So rights is the possibility for a process to do something, to perform an action on an item. So this is what a rights is. So it is specified. It does not need additional technology, but it certainly needs comments and proposals and extensions. This would be very welcome. Rules, well, rules is simply the set of rights to perform and obligation not to perform in the metaverse. Then let's go to the category human and users. So we have an account, of course, the collection of what a process has done, the personal profile of the human registering, the personal data. Then we have another class, which is process interaction. And here we are going to something that is very interesting, because now imagine that you have this metaverse instance, you are satisfied with the capabilities there. Now you enter in that metaverse instance and you find you, of course, is not you, it is your user or your device, a process, and wants to know what are the capabilities of this process. This again is specified. So then we have the basic item in the MMM model, because the process action is a collection of data that are collected to rights. We will see more the specification of that. And the request action and response actions is, so it's a process. This process wants to do something, but cannot do, but the process can request another process to do something for it. So this is done by having a request action, to which the called process provides this response. Then we have this service action. This is the discover thing that I was mentioning, or the interpret thing, or the inform thing. But let's move to some other areas. So we have the finance area. So this is quite interesting. So we have asset. What is an asset? It's simply an item that can be transacted. So we say that an asset should be spawned from an item. Then we have the provenance, which is the history of what happened to this asset. Transaction is, of course, very important. It's a very big item, and we have a specification for this. Value, well, you imagine what it is. It's the basic component of an asset. And then we have, basic component of a wallet. So then let's move to perception. So this is very, very big, because you can do a lot of things in the metaverse, and you need to have the appropriate technology support. So we are defining objects. We are defining audio objects, visual objects. We are also defining audiovisual objects. Then we have the descriptors. So descriptors of a scene. So we have a scene that is entirely composed of objects. So how do you describe that scene? Well, that's a specification for that. But of course, this specification, it's a lot of technologies, and we are calling for these technologies. Then we have the same for the visual descriptors and the audiovisual scene descriptors. Then we have another addition, which is quite interesting, because you are seeing that we have the audiovisual scene descriptors, but we also have the audio visual basics in this case. What's the difference between the two? Well, the difference is that the basic scene descriptors describes a scene composed of objects, but a scene descriptors describes a scene that is composed of objects and scenes. So we can have a hierarchical composition of scene by means of this. So we have other elements here that I will skip. Then we have the definition of the U environment. So you are in the metaverse and you want to do something. You want to send in the universe, but in the universe where? So you need to have some technology to do that. And so we have also the same mechanism here. We have the U location and we have the basic U location, because a U location can be a hierarchical location, and say for the M location, which of course is a location in the metaverse. Then we have the basic data. So I did not speak much about it, but we need some specification of coordinates. We need specification. What is an amount? What is a currency? So for things that operate in the metaverse and are not static things, it's important to know what is the internal state. Let's take just the example of emotion. That's a very important thing that you may decide to use for your purpose. Then we have the position and the spatial attitude. Spatial attitude is position and orientation. No, not just that. We have position and orientation, velocity and acceleration. So we stop at the second time derivative, but that should be sufficient. So then let's see what is this scope then. Of this new standard is to specify the JSON syntax and semantics of all items. We identify the users to the formats that are used to represent the items, but also the attributes that are attached to items. I will say more about that, and to identify the format that are used to represent the attributes. So this is the scope of the new specification. So the purpose of our call is to request proposals for technologies that are used to represent items and attributes. This is what we are doing. And of course, comments on everything else that is here, they are welcome by definition. So I will take 3 examples just to see concretely how this thing is planned to be, starting from rights. Definition and functional requirement. The definition is an item expresses the set of process action. You remember process action is the set of data that related to an action or to a set of actions for which you have rights that a process may perform in their level. What is level? Well, level is the level of rights are internal. When you register, the metaverse grants you some rights. They are internal rights. Your user moves in the metaverse and decides to acquire some rights. Maybe it can do that because it has the autonomy to do that, or it is driven directly by the human, but that is another story. In the third case is when the rights are granted to the process by another process. What's the example for this? So you want to visit the house of a friend in the metaverse. You cannot just simply go there because, of course, the house of your friend is protected by rights. So you don't have, by definition, the rights to go there. You may have, if your friends decides to grant the permanent rights to enter their house, but in general, your friends will grant you the right to enter their house, and after you leave, it will remove the right that it has granted to you. So this is the JSON syntax. I don't know how familiar you are with this. We have everything is specified in JSON. So we have this first part is simply to define the header. For each data type that we have a specification that is in terms of 3 characters. MMM stands for this is standard. This stands for the right, and this stands for the version and the subversion. Then we have the ID of the M instance. We have the ID of the M environment. We didn't talk about that, but of course, a metaverse in general is not a flat thing. It will administratively be divided maybe in different layers. So here we are just expressing that. Then we have the ID of the rights. And what are the rights data? Okay, first of all, we say that we have a level, and this level are specified somewhere. And then you have the ID of the process action. hold on for a minute because we will have a look at that as well. And well, and that's all. So this is the semantic, which is probably more visible. This is the header. Then we have the instance ID, rise ID, the rise data, which is level and process action. And of course, you can have many more than this. So what is the data format that are needed? Well, we don't see the need for a new data format, but of course, this is open to comments. And we are requesting comments on the functional requirements and the JSON syntax semantic, because we think that rights only needs that, but of course, comments are welcome. Next one, so this will be trickier, but also quite interesting, I hope. Process action. It is an item that specifies the action that the process can perform or has performed. The data, related data, the time for which you have the right. The item on which you have the right. The M location where you can exercise the right, or the U location where you can exercise. How can you exercise the right on the U location? Well, you have that because you can render something at the U location. Not necessarily you can do it. Then we have the functional requirements. The process action includes the idea of a process, the action, the time. Then we have the item, data, metadata, and media on which it performs the action. 2 words, because why do we need more than the items? Well, because when you when you have data in the device, they are not necessarily in the format that is used in the metaverse. So because of that, you may need to have a conversion for which we have the appropriate support. Okay, so then let's go to the functional requirement. So I said before, you have an action, you have the item. But it's not as simple as you have the right to perform an action on an item. There are many more things. And we have defined that there's 7 complements, we call them, where we say that the action can be performed at an M location, or you are asking a service to do something, or you are rendering an item from a place, and so on and so on. And then we have the request action and the response action, because this is a full set of data that related to this process action. JSON syntax would be too long to view it. So, I mean, if you click here, you can get this. But I think we should probably go here because it is more readable. So here we have the usual header, we have the instance ID, we have the process action ID, and here we have the process action data. So these are more than one, of course. So we have the process ID, the action ID, the duration, and the action object, the ID of the action object. And here, what I said, the action complement. So this can be any of these, as many that are needed to specify fully the action. And then we have the request action and response action. So we don't see new data format, but of course, this is the most critical element. And therefore, we welcome very much your comments. Because and also the JSON structure is very welcome. So finally, I've taken one of the objects that we have, the visual objects. So we say that a visual object is an object with visual perceptibility attributes that is rather clear. but then we say, what are the requirements? So we say that the visual objects support the idea of the virtual space where it is, so the M instance. Of course, it has an ID. Then we say that an ID can have parent objects or can have a parent object. And now this is one of the two objects that be spawned by the parent object. Or before you had the two parent objects, and this now you have only one. So you have the information for that. Then we have the data specific of the visual object, the ID of the visual object data format that is embedded, the length in bytes in the visual object, and the URI where this data can be found. Then we have the space-time attributes of the visual object, because a visual object can be something abstract. It's there waiting to be instantiated somewhere at some time, but it can have its own space and time attributes. And then we have the visual object attributes, the ID of the data format, the length in byte, and the URI. So this is the JSON syntax, and here more simply, the header, the ID of the M instance, the visual object ID, and the parent visual objects, ID, of course. Then we have the visual data that are made of the format, the length in bytes, and the URI. We have the space-time information, and we have the visual object attributes. Something that I did not say, but if you look at the JSON syntax, you will see that in general, none of these data are required. They are there for you to use, but not necessarily you are forced to specify that data. Okay, so let's see. Here we have something much more engaging, because we want to know visual formats, we want to know visual attributes, we want to know the formats of the visual attributes. So just let me say two simple ideas. So we have a use case that we call television media analysis. It's about having an automatic description of a television program where you can have people moving there or speaking and so on. So what would be the visual format? Well, the visual format could be, say, a bounding box with the face of a person. So that would be a visual format. But otherwise, you could have maybe the entire scene, and you need to describe them with a format. Then you have the visual attribute. So what is a visual attribute? So imagine that you have the bounding box with the face, and you have an AI module that is able to identify who is this guy. So that would be a visual attribute of the bounding box. So that's an explanation of it. And then what is the visual attribute format? Well, for instance, in MPAI, we have defined a format for the identifier, a general format. And so that could be the format that is used to specify what's the meaning of the data there. Then we are requesting comments on functional requirement. They are supported by the JSON syntax, comments on visual format, attributes and attribute format, and proposal for formats and attributes. So this is quite engaging. And this is just one, but we have quite a few more items for which there is a very strong request to provide proposals. So with this, I have finished the presentation of the call. Of course, you should read it because it's quite, there's quite a lot of material there. I want to give just one or two slides to give an example of how MPAI tries to have reusability of the technology that we specify. And So I would like to explain why and how the MMM can be applied to connected autonomous vehicles, which, by the way, is another standard for which we have a call for technologies. So a car has to move the vehicle from one place to another. It does that using a range of sensors to create a digital twin of the environment, wherever it is. So the CAV represents the digital twin of the environment with a data type that is called basic environment descriptor, which, by the way, it's also used here. What is this? It is the audiovisual scene descriptor, which is used here. But additionally to that, we have other specific data. For instance, we have environment data. So in the metaverse, probably we don't need, but maybe in the future it will be needed, humidity, temperature, and so on. And then also the road state. You understand, it's very clear. You may know that there is a roadblock somewhere, and so that is represented in the road state. We don't need that in the metaverse. So a CAV exchanges portions of its basic environment descriptors with other CAVs. And using that, it produces what we call the full environment descriptors, which is, again, another audiovisual scene descriptors that is integrated by other CAV-specific data. So our policy is to define data types that are reusable by other Mpai standards. For instance, the audiovisual scene descriptors we have talked about is specified by a standard that is called object and scene descriptor, specific for that, because it's quite many cases, but it is used by the audio standard, CAE, by the connected autonomous vehicle. We have another standard, it's called human-machine communication. Another is called machine-to-machine conversation. Multimodal conversation. Then we have this MMM standard. We have the object and scene descriptor, and we have the portable avatar format, which is another standard. I am closer to finish my presentation. 2 words on the framework license. So it's simply, it is, as I have said, it is a collection of guidelines to help patent holders to facilitate the production of the license so that the standard become more easily usable. So we have this says very things, compliance with the competition law. It will cover all the claims of essential IPR and copyright. It contains development rights and implementation rights. And the license should grant access in non-discriminatory fashion. It's quite obvious things, but they are written there. The scope may be subject to legal, bias, ethical, and moral limitations. The royalties will apply to everything that is written here, certainly on a worldwide basis. And implementation of the standard may use other IP to extend the use of the standard or provide other functionalities. Then here we have cases when you can use the standard without paying royalties. They are clearly specified cases here. And what is important is number 8, because we have done that already. Mpai facilitates the creation of a patent pool, and this point of the owner of essential patent expressing a preference on an entity that should administer the patent pool. Then, so these are really the key point. So the license will be issued before commercial implementation of the standard become available on the market. Then the total cost of the licenses will be in line with the total cost of the license for similar technologies, standardized in other SDOs, and the total cost of the license will consider the market value of the standard essential patents. So these are basic Guidelines, as I repeated, it's not something that you know exactly how much you will pay for it. It's guidelines. But, we think that they will be helpful to accelerate the production of a license. We have a fourth document to help submitters provide their proposals. It contains mandatory text that proposes selling clause. So we are serious about the framework license. So you should look carefully at what is written in this template for responses. Then you may use your own one if you want. The responses shall be submitted by the 6th of July before 33:59 UTC to the Mpai Secretary. And you have the link here. So we are looking forward to working with you on this exciting Tec project. And the invitation is that you join MPAI, you share the fun with us. We have a lot of fun. But we also build the future because we have already 11 standards and we are adding more. So this is the website where you can find everything, but here you have already plenty of links. With that, I will close my presentation. Sorry for having taken so much time, but it was not a simple thing that we needed to present. Now, the